My wife thought she could take my kids and my home while I was deployed serving my country. She thought I was too far away to see the lies, too busy to notice the stranger who started spending nights in my house, teaching my son how to throw a baseball while quietly tearing my family apart. She thought I would never find out about the payments, the secrets, the betrayal that cut deeper than any battlefield wound. But what she didn't know was that I'm trained to see patterns, to connect dots, to uncover the truth no matter how well it's hidden. And the day she demanded everything in court, I handed the judge one file that made the entire courtroom freeze and brought NCIS running. Let me tell you how it all began. They say the hardest part of serving your country is leaving your family behind. For me, that was true every time I boarded the USS Washington, ready to serve in Navy intelligence. My name is Tom Walker, and I've spent 16 years tracking threats overseas, protecting secrets most people will never hear about. I've watched the sun rise over the Pacific with salt spray on my face, clutching the photo of Rachel and our kids, Luke and Emma, tucked inside my locker. Rachel would smile in that photo, holding Luke at his baseball game, Emma with her bright eyes full of questions. Those images kept me grounded while chasing shadows across the sea. But as months passed during this last deployment, her voice on the video calls grew distant, her laughter rare. She'd rush our calls, citing errands or bad connections, and the kids seemed hesitant, like they were waiting for her permission to speak. I tried to shake it off, focusing on my missions, but there's a gut feeling you can't ignore, no matter how much you wish you could. And out there in the quiet of the carrier at night, I started to suspect that the real battle was waiting for me back home. But I had no idea just how deep that battle would cut. Back home in Norfolk, Rachel was living her own routine, or so I thought. She would send short updates about Luke's baseball games or Emma's school projects, but her eyes never quite met the camera during our video calls. As a Navy intelligence officer, you learn to read the smallest details. A slight change in tone, a hesitation, a glance away at the wrong moment. It's the same instinct that keeps you alive in the field, and now it was keeping me awake at night. I started noticing inconsistencies. An unfamiliar men's cologne in our bathroom during my last leave, receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of, in towns an hour away. When I asked Rachel, she brushed it off with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You're overthinking, Tom," she'd say. "You've been away too long." Maybe she was right. Maybe the long deployments had made me suspicious. But then she started ending calls abruptly, claiming bad reception in Norfolk of all places, and she wouldn't let the kids stay on the call long. Emma's drawings stopped coming. Luke's updates about baseball faded. All I could do was focus on my missions, convincing myself it was nothing. But the truth is, I was already running scenarios in my head, piecing together data points like I would on any operation. Because deep down, I knew something was wrong, and I was preparing for the day I would have to face it. It was during a late-night intelligence briefing on the USS Washington that the message came through. A simple text from Rachel. "Don't call tonight, taking the kids to Mom's." Her mother lived in Norfolk, where reception was flawless. I stared at the screen, that gut feeling tightening like a vice. In the middle of tracking threats halfway around the world, I realized the real threat might be sitting in my own home. That night, unable to sleep, I opened the hidden security app on my tablet, the system I had installed in the house before deployment, the one Rachel didn't know about. The live feed was quiet, showing empty hallways and the soft glow of the kitchen light. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I'd shut it off and get some sleep. But then at 2:14 a.m. Virginia time, I saw him. A man I had never seen before, stepping into my bedroom with a casual familiarity that made my stomach drop. Rachel was with him, laughing softly, holding wine glasses, my wedding crystal. They didn't even close the door as they moved to my bed, our bed. I watched it all in silence, the same way I would review surveillance footage on a target. Except this time, the target was the life I thought I still had. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't just betrayal, it was war. In the days that followed, I moved like a man on autopilot. My duties on the USS Washington didn't pause because my life was falling apart back home. I still analyzed enemy transmissions, still briefed my team, still kept my uniform sharp and my mind sharper. But every free moment I was gathering intel on my own wife. With help from my closest friend Jason Reed, our comms specialist, I created a quiet, systematic operation. I remotely accessed our joint accounts, cross-referenced Rachel's credit card charges, phone records, and travel logs. I set alerts for unusual spending, flagged patterns that didn't align with her explanations. That's when I found out who he really was, Daniel Dan Mercer. But digging deeper, using the same tools I used to track threats overseas, I discovered that Dan Mercer didn't exist. His background was a patchwork of fake employment records, inconsistent addresses, and offshore financial activities. I saw patterns only someone trained in counter-espionage would notice. And the worst part wasn't just that Rachel had brought a stranger into my home, into my bed. It was that she had let him near my children, Luke and Emma, letting him become a friendly neighbor who taught Luke to throw a baseball, who read Emma's stories while I was gone. I realized this wasn't just about an affair anymore. Dan Mercer was no ordinary man, and the enemy had found its way into my home. Once I confirmed Dan Mercer wasn't who he claimed, I leveraged every contact I had. I quietly reached out to Commander Harris, explaining the situation without emotion. "Sir, I believe there's a potential domestic security breach connected to my family," I said, my voice steady, the same way I'd brief any operation. He authorized emergency leave under family crisis, giving me 30 days back home, along with a quiet nod that said, "Do what you have to do." When I stepped off the transport in Norfolk, the air felt different. I didn't call Rachel to tell her I was home. Instead, I checked into a motel 20 minutes from our house, setting up a personal command post with my laptop, notes, and surveillance feed. Over the next 48 hours, I watched, recorded, and confirmed my worst fears. Dan was in and out of my house, comfortable, acting like he owned the place. Worse, I saw him asking Luke questions about what your dad does and Emma about when daddy comes home. Rachel laughed it off in front of him, not realizing she was letting a predator gather intel from our kids. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal anymore. Dan Mercer was targeting me because of my clearance, my access, and my deployments. He had used Rachel and she had let him. That was when I decided it was time to stop watching and start taking my life back. I waited for the perfect moment. According to Luke's school schedule, both kids would be home that Friday afternoon while Rachel was at her part-time accounting job. Dan wouldn't be there yet, and I needed to see my children first before the storm hit. When Luke opened the door and saw me, his eyes widened before he launched himself into my arms. "Dad, you're home early!" he shouted, and for a moment the world felt normal again. Emma came running down the stairs, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe, tears in her eyes. I knelt, kissing the top of her head, promising myself I'd protect that innocence no matter what. As we sat in the kitchen, I listened to them talk about school, about friends, about how Mr. Dan was helping with Luke's baseball throws and reading Emma bedtime stories. They didn't know what was happening, and it wasn't their fault. "Does Mr. Dan ask you about Daddy's work?" I asked softly, masking the steel in my voice with a father's calm. Luke looked down, nodding slowly. Yeah, he just asks what kind of stuff you do when you're gone, he mumbled. That was all the confirmation I needed. I took them out for ice cream and a movie documenting every moment, because I didn't know how long it would take to fix what had been broken. And when we returned, Rachel's car was in the driveway and beside it was Dan's unfamiliar Audi. It was time to end this. I told Luke and Emma to head to the backyard and play while I surprised Mom. They ran off, trusting me completely, unaware of the storm about to break inside their home. I adjusted the camera on my phone, hit record, and stepped quietly through the front door. From the kitchen, I heard laughter, Rachel's laughter, a sound I once lived for, now twisted with betrayal. Dan's voice followed, low, confident, as he spoke about next steps. I moved closer, staying silent, my boots making no sound on the hardwood I installed with my own hands. Once the papers are filed, we'll get full custody, Dan was saying, leaning against my kitchen counter like he owned it. Military courts don't fight these things, and the house will be yours. Rachel's voice was cold, practical. It's about time. He chose deployments over us. This will give the kids stability. I stepped into the doorway, letting them see me before I spoke. Rachel's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing without words. Dan's practiced smirk cracked for a split second. Interesting conversation, I said calmly. Mind if I join? Dan tried to recover, stepping forward with a fake smile, hand outstretched. You must be Tom. I've heard so much about, or should I say, I cut him off, locking eyes with him. Igor Volkov. The name landed like a grenade in the room. Dan's eyes hardened, his fake smile gone, and that was the moment they realized this was over. Dan's hand dropped, eyes narrowing as he realized the game was up. Rachel's voice broke the silence, trembling. Tom, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to... This is my house, Rachel, I replied, calm but cold. And you're the one who let a foreign operative walk through my front door. Dan's mask cracked further, but he tried to play it off. You're confused, Tom. Let's not scare the kids. The kids are outside, safe, and you won't get near them again. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Your real name is Igor Volkov, and you've been using my wife to get to me, to my work, to my clearance. Rachel's face crumpled, her bravado gone. Tom, I didn't know. You knew enough. I cut her off, pulling a flash drive from my pocket and tossing it onto the counter. Proof of every payment, every lie, every visit. You thought I wouldn't find out, but you forgot who you married. Dan's posture shifted, the easy confidence gone, replaced by cold calculation. You think you can stop this? I already have, I replied. At that moment, sirens wailed outside, blue lights flashing through the kitchen window. NCIS agents and federal marshals moved in, storming my home, guns drawn but controlled. Rachel backed away, tears streaming. Dan tried to run, but they tackled him to the floor, the facade of Dan Mercer shattering forever. And as they dragged him away, I turned to Rachel. We're not done. The days after Dan's arrest felt like living in a fog. NCIS and federal agents came in waves collecting evidence, questioning Rachel, securing my home like it was an active crime scene. I stayed calm, focused, documenting everything, because I knew the real battle hadn't even started yet. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Norfolk family courthouse in my Navy dress uniform, service medals displayed across my chest. My attorney, Sam Grant, a former JAG lawyer, walked beside me, nodding quietly as we entered. Across the aisle, Rachel sat with her attorney, Angela Pierce, looking small, her eyes swollen from crying but still clinging to whatever leverage she thought she had left. She had filed for divorce, demanding the house, full custody of Luke and Emma, and a chunk of my military pension, claiming I was unstable from deployments and dangerous. Her lawyer smirked as they presented their case, painting me as an absent father who chose war over family, a man too damaged by service to care for his kids. But when it was Sam's turn, he calmly handed the judge the same file I dropped on my kitchen counter that day. Bank statements, surveillance footage, communication logs, proof of Rachel's cooperation, witting or not, with a foreign operative. The judge's eyes widened as she read, glancing at Rachel, then at me. And that's when the courtroom doors opened and the agents stepped in. As the agents entered, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. Rachel's face drained of color as NCIS and federal marshals approached. Her attorney tried to protest, but the judge raised her hand, her eyes sharp. "Mrs. Walker, you will remain seated," she ordered. Dan, Igor Volkov, had already been charged with espionage, and now the evidence proved Rachel had accepted money, facilitated access, and let a foreign operative near classified information through her home. Whether she was manipulated or complicit didn't matter anymore. "Sergeant Walker," the judge said, looking at me, "given these extraordinary circumstances, I'm granting you full legal and physical custody of your children, effective immediately." I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the weight of that victory. It wasn't joy, it was relief, the kind that sinks deep into your bones when you know your children are finally safe. Rachel sobbed, her shoulders shaking as the agents escorted her out for questioning, her cries echoing in the courtroom that had once been her battlefield. I didn't gloat, I didn't smirk. I turned and walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. The final pieces of my family's safety secured, knowing that Luke and Emma would go home with me, not to a house of lies. But as I held the door open for my kids to step into their new chapter, I realized something even deeper. The fight for your family doesn't end with a courtroom victory. It's what you do next that defines everything. Walking out of that courthouse, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a father who finally kept his promise, a promise to protect my children, even from the betrayal we never saw coming. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming our peace and building a life where my kids could feel safe again. If you've ever faced betrayal from those you trusted most, remember, your story isn't over. You can fight back with quiet strength. Share your thoughts below, and if this story meant something to you, subscribe for more true stories of courage and quiet victories.